Has modern dating gotten harder or easier? I'm Jack. Let's get right into it. So let's start with some of the ways that modern dating has indeed gotten easier. Some of the ways that modern dating has gotten easier comes down to access, right? That you potentially have the ability to connect with a way vaster range of people than would ever have been possible, right? And technology has allowed that. You know, even if you've had the experience of swiping ad nauseum and it's not something you like to do, you know, if you sit there for an hour and you swipe, you might go through, 100 to 1,000 or more profiles, right? It would be very difficult for you to have any way of connecting with that level of people, unless perhaps you are, a king or queen or someone super famous, right? So access has opened up. In some ways, we could even say that access is democratized, right? Now, there's plenty of ways that this isn't true, but I'm just saying on the front end, the fact that in theory, anyone in your area that's on a similar dating app, you might be able to connect with. Certainly growing up in somewhere like the UK, that I think is a much more class structured society, you wouldn't have ways of meeting people outside certain social surrounds or educational or social backgrounds unless you were running in those circles, unless you were in those, clubs, universities, families, etc. Right? So in some ways, we're deconstructing that you have to be, a Harvard graduate, or you have to be, 100th in line to the British throne in order to meet certain people. Of course, some of those realities still abound, and in certain ways, some of them will have gotten worse, right? So I'm not saying that this is all, just an upward trajectory. There is more nuance there, but we can also take a partial truth that there's been some democratization of access. The other way that dating is potentially easier is that you might be able to find out a lot more about a person before you actually go on a date with them. Right now, of course, we have the issue of, fake profiles, catfishing, etc. So you see with so many of these things, right, it's like there's a solution, but there's a set of challenges that come with it. But if you just put that aside, the notion that you can quite quickly, if someone's being somewhat earnest, realize like, hey, does this person want to have children, right? Does this person smoke? Does this person do drugs? What is this person's attitude to marijuana? Does this person live in my geography? Does this person have an interest in biking or swimming or meditation or karaoke, right? There's lots of ways that, very quickly, and obviously there's a risk of sort of being prematurely judgmental or kind of, over-filtering, but you can quite quickly narrow a search in a way that, how would you have done that other than, again, being physically a part of an institution, right? If you are, let's say you're Jewish and you want to meet someone that's Jewish, historically you probably would have had to, been in the synagogue or moving in the social structures of the Jewish community in order to do that. Right now, in a sense, you can meet someone anywhere in the world by applying that filter on an app, right? And that the time and energy cost is pretty limited, and you may even be using a free version of the app, right? It might be that you have to pay premium in order to get that level of granularity, but you're talking about a few dollars a month versus having to travel to get out there to be in the mix, etc. So there's also a way that dating's easier in that it's casting the net broader in geographical terms, and I think it's less socially stratified. And I think it also has forced some people to think about, well, what is it they're actually looking for, right? Like, is it important that I meet someone that has the same religious background? Is it important to me that I meet someone that has a certain background of educational similarity? Is it important to me that I meet someone within a certain range of geography? Is it important that I meet someone who's also, vegan, or that shares conservative views or moderate views or progressive views, or actually that isn't important to me? So I think in some ways it's making you a more sophisticated dater, because not data from Dardum, data like a person who dates, because it's getting you to think about some of that stuff right up front on the front end. That said, there are many ways in which I think dating is less satisfying for people, right? I speak to a lot of people who are out there on the front lines dating and are having a hard time, and that they would say their experience is low quality, lots of noise. It's rare that they actually go on in-person dates. They have lots of people that want to be their text pal. But, if you're a woman that dates men, a lot of women saying like, couldn't the guy just take me on a date? I don't mind. It doesn't even have to be an interesting date. It doesn't have to be anything. Just literally just name a time and a place. Let's get together and we'll know more in half an hour than we will just going back and forth as this kind of like, pseudo pen pals. You've probably seen the Tinder swindler, right? There are all these issues to do with, fake profiles, people using the lover boy method, right? Pretending that they are falling in love with you when actually they are copying and pasting the same messages to multiple people. People, adjusting their pictures. You could go on and you've probably had your own experiences of that, right? And sometimes that makes people pretty cynical, like, are there any good people out there? Because a lot of the noise is created by the lowest common denominator behavior, right? Sending people unsolicited pictures, being aggressive, being overtly and quickly sexual. You could say in many ways, dating apps have lowered the bar for those lowest common denominator behaviors. Because at least if you were gonna, let's just flick this around. I love this. It's the geese. At least if you were gonna flick this, you're gonna flick this. Now he's not gonna be able to stabilize his tripod. At least if you were gonna have to previously do this in an environment like in a bar, you would have to deal with the social consequences of obnoxious behavior, right? If you were gonna flash your genitals at someone in a bar, or if you were gonna be hypersexual quickly, you might get some social feedback from the person, but also from, the bar staff, or from their friends, or from, their, brother, or your own friends, right? There's lots of ways, subtly and otherwise, that we moderate and mediate each other's behavior. But in the kind of the world of online dating apps, fast food snacking, a lot of those social moderation mechanisms are not there, right? So in that way, I think it's harder. It's almost like, we've democratized in some ways, we've opened up access, but the opening up of access has also opened us up to lots of behaviors that we just aren't interested in, right? So it's almost like more access, more noise, something like that. I think another way that dating is harder, if you just look at the the data. If you look at the data on dating, that the data say that the data is not. Okay, I need to be a bit careful here. If you look at the datums, the data on dating, there are, particularly this is true of younger generations, there are just fewer relationships forming, right? So this sort of, thing that a lot of people, particularly if they're dating with purpose, as a lot of you probably are, right? Like, I'm dating in order to, find a relationship, even if it's going to be a short relationship. Like, I want a relationship. I don't just want, a hookup or pen pals or text ships or situationships. I want something that's got a little bit of substance. The actual thing that I'm aiming for, a relationship, there are a few of them happening, right? So in a sense, the sociological trend might be against me. Now, the counter to that is that there is a lot more acceptance, broadly speaking, of a whole range of, sort of like the possibilities of the relational matrix, right? It's not just that we have to be dating with a view to being lifelong, partners. It's like, I can actually say, hey, looking for a long-term relationship, open to short, or looking for a short-term relationship, open to long, or I'm, ethically non-monogamous, or I'm interested in polyamory, or I have a primary, but I'm looking to swing, and there's, so much more that goes into that, in a sense, I would call it the postmodern dating territory, right? Where we've deconstructed some of the typical structures and we've actually grown our acceptance for a whole range of things. Now, you might say, that's great, but I don't have any interest in that. So to me, I just want, me and the other person, and that's it. And so all of this sort of, heterogeneity in this way, it's not good. I'm actually looking for, one person meets one person. But even if that's true, just the sort of the opening up of the acceptance that, okay, even if it's just one person, the way that goes down might look different. You might decide to get married. You might decide to be cohabitating. You might decide to live apart together, right? To be in a committed relationship, but to keep your own places. You might decide that you're together when you're in the same place, and you're still monogamous when you're not, but you have periods of time. I've met people like this when I'm traveling. They're like, I've got a long-term partner, but we also spend, 3 months of the year just kind of like doing our own thing, right? And we're still exclusive, but we actually have a sort of a level of autonomy and freedom and times of the year that most sort of traditional coupling wouldn't have, right? Or maybe you're part of a blended family, right? And we're much more inclusive and accepting, and rightly so, I think, of that. So you could say that one of the ways that dating's got easier is that the script has been blown open, right? But obviously, anytime we blow open the script, we also create other second and third order effects, like other challenges. For example, on how people show up and behave, or even, and I get these kind of feedback questions a lot from people, like, what should I even expect from dating? Like, is this acceptable? Like, we texted 5 times and then the guy dropped off. Like, have I even been ghosted? Do I text him again? Does he deserve a reply from me? I kind of feel like, well, if he's not getting in touch with me, I don't want to get in touch with him, but I also don't want to like ghost him back. So there's also this kind of Wild West aspect of the sort of open protocols of dating, where the thing that you're signing on, if you're on a dating app, maybe in theory you're signing on to say, I'm going to treat people with respect and I'm not going to harass people. But within that wheelhouse called treat people with respect and not harassing them, there's a whole set of, how does this exchange go? What do we owe each other or not? And I think some people are struggling with that, right? So all these phrases, for instance, like ghosting and breadcrumbing, I don't think they were around in previous generations because they didn't really even have the technology for them to exist. Because even simplistically, I grew up in a rural village in England, right? And I remember talking to my uncle one time, and he was saying when he grew up, if you even went to the next village and you didn't have reason to be there, the assumption was you were there for bad reasons, right? Particularly as a young man. So if you think about it, let's just say your social surround is therefore going to be somewhat limited to, let's just say your village or your town or some nearby areas. You might be limited to who you're going to meet in that social surround, right? And so let's say you start dating someone, or you guys have a thing and then you don't, you're probably not going to fully ghost them, because you're still going to see them in the bar, and there's going to be a social cost and a kind of a moderation of the community to that behavior, right? Like if you start ghosting this person, maybe now, none of the other women, if you're a guy that dates women, are actually going to talk to you because they know that like that's kind of how you show up. So dating is happening in a much more atomized context, right? It's much more like, two individuals connecting who don't have a social surround that holds them. And actually, I think that is one of the real challenges of modern dating, right? And by the way, people say modern dating, I think often what they mean is postmodern dating, but they don't necessarily have that distinction at the forefront. The modern period started, several hundred years ago, right? The modern period started really with Enlightenment thinking, the rise to the forefront of science and the scientific method, things like the separation of powers, the rise of democracy and parliaments and rule of law, and kind of moving beyond this idea of the divine right of kings or queens. So, the modern world has been online for several hundred years. The postmodern world really has been online since probably something like the 60s in a meaningful way. And I'd say in a much more meaningful way in the last, maybe 10 years. So that's just a little aside. But when people say, hey, the problem with modern dating, and then they list off a whole load of things, and really what they're doing is critiquing the latest wave of feminism, I think they're actually talking about the challenges of postmodern dating. But they go in there together, right? We have traditional modern and postmodern all kind of happening at the same time. So one of the challenges of opening up the scripts in this way is there's no getting to know people other than going on a date with them, right? So it almost makes dating higher stakes, because you go on that first date, you think, maybe there's some interest, but it's not like we're going to stay casually connected because, we have a friendship group in common, or I'm going to see you at church, or I'm going to see you on campus, or I'm still going to see you, because we're part of the same professional network, or we share the same office. It's sort of high stakes. So I often think there are connections that could maybe get somewhere, but it's almost like there's not enough of an obvious yes off of that first date to carry the attention and momentum. Meanwhile, you're still getting pinged by all, if you've got like incoming matches on, and just the people don't seem, I think, to get out and about with quite the same luster that maybe they did pre-COVID. So I think that's factoring it in there as well. So I would say on balance, there's, from the people that I speak to, that people are having the sense that dating is harder now than it was. So I think it's more open, it's more democratized, but actually the lived experience of most people is that it's harder. It's harder to get invited on a date. I know a lot of people who don't want to be on the apps, either aren't on the apps at all or feel that they have to be on the apps because that's where kind of all the action is. But a lot of the action is this kind of noisy, low grade, doesn't really amount to anything exchange and behavior. So it's sort of like we've maybe somehow taken like higher quality, lower volume, and we've exchanged it for much higher volume of possible interactions, but with like a low quality and no kind of sort of social surround or social protocol that's really supporting that. So I think oftentimes people's experience is they're bored and frustrated, and they feel sort of sad and disappointed about what's happening in their dating, and they don't really see how can I shift and make this better. It's sort of like, well, I can get on a different platform, but I might be recreating a lot of the same experiences. If I look at the hit rates, and we haven't even, by the way, gotten to some of the demographics of this. A lot of the demographics can also be really difficult for men, right? Because it's like a small proportion of men get most of the matches, and if you are, let's say, and gross generalization, like a less educated, lower income guy, you're probably having the experience that you're swiping a ton and you might be getting crickets, right? So that's a different set of issues. If you're getting matches but the quality is low, that's a different experience than like I basically don't get any matches, right? So it's like I'm here, I'm putting hours in at the coalface and I'm getting very little back, and I might be being pretty open-minded about who I match with, right? Like generally men are going to swipe right more than women, gross generalization, but the data backs that up. So if you're having the experience that, yeah, I get matches, but it's noise, maybe there could be a little solace that actually that's an easier experience possibly than never really getting the match, because at least you're getting some kind of interaction, engagement, feedback from the marketplace. But I also know there are a lot of people who are coming off the apps to double down on how can I meet people in person? How can I take my hobbies and really energize my life through experiences I can meet people in person? Classes, workshops, seminars, dog parks, athletics, drama, music, sports, leagues, hiking, organizing social events and encouraging other people to bring new people, like trying to be a bit of a connector and a hub. But again, if you are less likely to be an out and about kind of person, it might be that it's difficult to come by things that way. So the purpose of this video was to talk about whether dating is getting easier or harder, to offer you some compassion if you're having the experience that it's hard, because a lot of people are having that experience. And it wasn't really to offer you a particular solution to that, but more to say, hey, kind of, hang in there, because I think there's something that's also happening collectively that we need to be part of, right? So sometimes life is bigger than us, right? Meaning we're going to participate in collective experiences like the deconstruction of dating, which on an individual level might suck. But on a collective level, longer term, there might be people, who are meeting people from more diverse backgrounds, where we're sort of, it's less like, who is your mum and dad and what school did you go to? And it's more that people can meet people based upon, interests, shared experience and other things. So it might be that we're kind of the forefront, the vanguard of something that is going to be useful for the collective, but at an individual level, it is kind of difficult. I'll leave you with this. I would follow where you feel your authentic alignment and aliveness is, right? So if you get on the apps and you're like, yeah, it takes energy, but actually there is something I feel aligned with here, right? There is an energy that I bring and a kind of an intention and a purpose, and it doesn't always get reflected back, but I'm able to kind of like sift through the noise and stay focused on what I want, then absolutely be on the apps. If you're finding that the dominant energy that you're bringing to the apps is hopelessness, frustration, and resignation, I would say, let it go. You can always come back. They're always going to be there, but experience something else, or just focus on your own health and well-being and fulfillment in your life and see from that place what comes into your life, right? It's really hard to manifest something kind of meaningful and fulfilling from a place of hopelessness and despair, right? And I'm not saying that to pressure you if you're feeling hopelessness, like, hey, snap out of it and be more fulfilled. It's just saying all that energy that from a place of already feeling hopeless that you're expending on the dating apps, that might be kind of fruitless, impotent energy for you. So trust yourself. You'll know where you feel alignment. Even if you have to draw 100 blanks on that 101st thing, you're like, oh, this feels alive. Like this speed dating event, that feels alive for me. Or this hiking group, I've gone to 10, but this one is the one where the quality of the people I met just seemed to vibe with me. Or there were, let's say I'm a woman that dates men, there were a number of guys there that I would love to get to know, even if it was just on a social friendship basis. Put yourself in those environments. And if you haven't found them, just keep striking until, you know, it's like you're striking for oil, right? You're striking for gold. So most of the time you're going to draw blanks, but then eventually there might be that one thing that really opens up a world for you. So hang in there, stay with it. I'd love to know what your experience is. Leave me a comment. I do read every comment. Smash the like if you can. It just helps me get these videos out. And I'd also love to have you as part of the community. So please subscribe. I release videos multiple times a week on dating, personal growth, self-improvement, and authenticity, how to be more yourself. And I'm going to be releasing more videos soon on more broad topics to do with the culture wars, relationships between men and women, and what is going on collectively and how we can up level. So I'd love to have you a part of this community. And I'm Jack. As always, thanks for being here.